The fight against ISIL could take years. That's a message from the US Secretary of State to coalition partners. But what is the end game? And could an ISIL defeat play into the hands of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Mike Hanna. It's been almost 4 months since a US-led coalition began targeting ISIL fighters across Syria and Iraq. But questions remain about the so-called endgame. How long will it take to defeat ISIL? Will coalition boots on the ground be required? And what will become of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad if and when ISIL is defeated? On Wednesday, the US Secretary of State met with foreign ministers of around 60 coalition members in Brussels. John Kerry said the battle against ISIL, also known as Daesh, was having an effect on the ground.
The roughly 1,000 coalition air missions that we have flown have reduced Daesh's leadership and inflicted damage on its logistical and operational capabilities. In much of Iraq, Daesh's earlier momentum has dissipated. With coalition support, Iraqi forces have regained ground at Mosul and Haditha dams. They have retaken territory in the vicinity of Tikrit and expanded the security perimeter around the Baji oil refinery. In the north and west, Kurdish troops are battling bravely, and Sunni tribal fighters are beginning to come on board. We also continue to strike targets in Syria, where Daesh has seen its command facilities attacked, its oil infrastructure damaged, and its siege of Kobani blocked. It is much harder now than when we started for Daesh to assemble forces in strength, to travel in convoys, and to launch concerted attacks. No large Daesh unit can move forward aggressively without worrying about what will come down on it from the skies.
Well, let's get the thoughts of our guests on today's Inside Story. In Tehran, Emad Abshanas, political analyst and editor-in-chief of the Iran Diplomat. In London, Fawaz Gerges, chair of contemporary Middle Eastern politics and international relations at the London School of Economics. And in Washington, D.C., Ryan Evans, founder and editor-in-chief of the online debate and analysis platform War on the Rocks. A welcome to you all. Let's get right to it with Fawaz Gerges. Is there any sense at all that the US and its coalition partners are looking beyond ISIL?
Well, I doubt it very much. I think the focus now is not just on ISIL or ISIS or Daesh. I think the focus is on Iraq itself. If you ask me what's the most important strategic goal that the United States has in this particular campaign, is to basically help the Iraqi state stands on its feet, to allow the Iraqi forces, not just the Iraqi government, but its allies, the Kurds and the Shiite allies, to recapture territories from Daesh, in particular Mosul, Tikrit, Fallujah, to co-opt the Sunni communities, some of which have basically feel very persecuted and estranged from the political process. Iraq is the priority, even though Iraq is not the only theater. Syria is a secondary theater. But the first and the foremost important strategic goal is to basically rescue Iraq, to prevent Daesh from expanding and threatening the capital, Baghdad. But I don't think either the United States or even the coalition as a whole has given much thought to what will happen after Daesh is defeated, if it ever can be defeated. I think the first and the most important priority is Iraq at this particular stage, as I understand it.
Well, Ryan Evans, your view?
I think that's exactly right. The U.S. has clearly decided to focus on Iraq for the time being. Iraq is more strategically important to the United States, but also the conflict in Syria is frankly a lot more complex and intractable. In Iraq, we have a friendly government that we obviously helped stand up, that we can push to implement certain reforms to re-enfranchise the Sunni community and deal with some of the drivers of this conflict. But in Syria, it's just simply not, we don't have those same levers. And I think that's where we're going to continue to see the biggest problems for U.S. policy in the region.
Well, Imad Abshanas appears to be a rare diversion, a coalition of interests here, because Iran too is focusing on events and is deeply concerned about events in Iraq, is it not?
Well, exactly. There are concerns for Iran in Iraq, especially about ISIL. The difference between the Iranian opinion and the American opinion, or we can say the Western opinion, is that the Iranis are planning to eliminate ISIL from the ground, while till now what the Americans are doing is weakening ISIL. They don't have any strategic plan to eliminate Daesh from the ground because everyone knows that airstrikes will not eliminate a group that is working on the ground. It will just weaken them. To eliminate these groups, they need to support the Iraqi army more than they are supporting it now. Right now, the Iraqi army is just getting supports from the Iranians to fight with ISIL. It's not getting so much support from the American side. If the Americans want to eliminate ISIL from the ground, they have to support the Iraqi army more and more. I think the main reason is that they still don't have any plans for ISIL in Syria because ISIL is have some roots in Syria. They just want to eliminate to stop ISIL from working in Iraq, but they want to keep it in Syria.
Well, Fawaz Gerges, some argued at the beginning of this coalition campaign, a matter of some 3 months ago, that it was dealing with the wrong issue, that the cause of the rise of ISIL is Bashar al-Assad and his government, and that by ignoring that, you are allowing ISIL to flourish. What's your view of that position?
Well, I mean, as you well know, Mike, there are significant differences between the Obama administration and some of its allies, in particular Turkey. While Turkey and President Erdogan prioritize the fight against the Assad government, the United States says the fight is on Daesh, and not only is the fight on Daesh in Iraq as a priority. The second point, I think, and here I am being very analytical in my put politics aside, there has been a consistency to the American position on Syria. The Americans have learned one major lesson of Iraq, and that is you don't disband the institutions. You don't destroy the army and the security forces. So even though in the last 4 years, the Americans have insisted that Bashar al-Assad must step down, they have also made it very clear they would like to maintain the institutions. They would like to maintain the army, the security forces, the police. They're terrified of a security vacuum in which, if there is a security vacuum in Syria, Mike, who's going to fill this security vacuum? Surely not the Free Syrian Army. This particular security vacuum would be filled by al-Nusra Front, the official arm of Al-Qaeda, or ISIS. But at this particular point, the reason why there are major differences, you asked me earlier whether there is any particular strategic blueprint for the morning after defeat of ISIS, if ISIS could ever be defeated. Not only there is no strategic blueprint, in fact, the Americans at this particular point disagree vehemently with the Turks and the Saudis and the Emiratis and say our focus is on Iraq. Syria is deeply complex. If we take on Assad, we're going against Iran, against Hezbollah, against the Russians. This is a very complicated civil war, and that's why the focus at this particular stage, let's be done with Iraq and let's move on to Syria. And here's my final point on Syria. The Americans insist on a political solution. They do not believe that there is a military solution inside Syria. They want to exert pressure on Assad. They want to train and arm the Free Syrian Army in 2 or 3 years in order for Assad to come to a particular understanding with the so-called moderate opposition inside Syria.
Well, Orion Evans, Fawaz Gerges, quite kindly there sort of said that there's a clear American strategy, but Critics of U.S. policy would argue that there is, in fact, prevarication, that from the very beginning in Syria, there has not been a clarity about what the Obama administration wants to do in Syria, or indeed how it is going to do it. The battle against ISIL has suspended that particular debate, yet it exists very strongly still, does it not? Or should?
Yeah, I think it's actually a really important debate to keep at the forefront as we look at the ISIL problem. Because from the beginning, I think the Obama administration has demonstrated how the worst possible way to pursue a strategy of non-intervention. It was clear that the Obama administration did not want to intervene in Syria, yet at the same time they would say things like, President Obama would say things like, Assad must go, his downfall is inevitable, which of course incentivized our allies and proxies in the region to get even more active in supporting the opposition when we clearly weren't intending on doing anything still, set a red line, Assad stepped over the red line, and we didn't do anything. Which was the right decision. The mistake was in setting the red line in the first place. And so while President Obama has pursued a strategy of non-intervention, he's sent the wrong signals to the region at pretty much every opportunity that he can. And we'll see if he's able to resolve these contradictions. Particularly, Fawaz brought up Turkey. Our policy differences, U.S. policy differences with Turkey are pretty severe at this moment. And now there are talks about setting up some sort of a buffer zone along the Turkish border in Syria. But I'm very interested to see what that brings in terms of a change in U.S. policy or U.S. strategy in the region as far as Syria is concerned.
I'm going to return to that point in a moment, but Ahmad Abshanas, I want to come to you. Does Iran have a slightly longer-term view? Is Iran looking forward to what happens after ISIL with regard to Syria? Is there a degree of greater long-term planning in Tehran?
Well, for Tehran, since the beginning of the crisis in Syria, the Iranian officials have insisted that the solution for the Syrian crisis should be a political solution and not a military solution. But, some forces, especially Turkey and some other countries, they insisted that the opposition can defeat the central government. Right now we see that we have entered a circle of dead ends where nobody knows what's going to happen in Syria. Of course, the only way to solve the Syrian solution is through a political solution where the government and if we can call it the moderate opposition or the Syrian opposition, those who are Syrian can sit together and talk to each other to reach a solution, while they will face a new problem in Syria, and it is the existence of foreign groups, foreign fighters like ISIL, who don't care of any kind of a political solution, and they are planning of having their own Islamic government or Islamic state in the region. And right now they have the financial sources, they have the military sources, and some political supports from other countries, and they exist on the ground. And we have seen a lot of confrontations between even the Syrian opposition and ISIL itself inside Syria. And right now, the main issue that should be thought after eliminating ISIL from Iraq, if ISIL can be eliminated from Iraq, is how to solve the problem in Syria and eliminate ISIL from inside Syria too.
Fawaz, Gerges, while this campaign against ISIL has been continuing, there's been a lot of subtle and not so subtle shifts in the wider geopolitical landscape. Ryan Evans brought up the issue of Turkey. Now, what has happened? Russia in economic crisis. Russia, one of Syria's strongest backers, along with Iran. Russia now striking a deal with Turkey in terms of gas pipelines. All of these factors are starting to play into account. Would factors like this actually aid or assist a greater degree of cooperation and discussion between the two opposing parties with regard to Syria and Bashar al-Assad?
Well, you know, Mike, you're asking a very important question, whether there is a causal relationship between geostrategic, geoeconomic, and geostrategic relations. I mean, think of the relationship between Iran and Turkey. This is a significant economic relationship, as you know. We're talking about $20, $30 billion in the next few years. The relationship between Turkey and Russia now, they're thinking of $100 billion growing the relationship. Yet, as we've seen in Ankara in the last 2 days, both the Russian president and the Turkish president disagreed fundamentally on the question of Syria. We're also seeing one particular point you have not mentioned is the convergence of interest between the United States and Iran, in particular on the question of fighting ISIS or Daesh, and also on the question of Iranian role in the neighborhood in Iraq. Even though the United States says we do not coordinate with Iran, there is indirect coordination because the Iraqi government and the Iranian government are coordinating very closely. But the reality is there are fundamental differences over Syria, over basically the presidency of Bashar al-Assad. So far, and this is the point, even though the Americans are willing to deal, the American Barack Obama is not interested in Syria. Barack Obama is not interested in the Middle East. In fact, Barack Obama has come back to the Middle East screaming and kicking. The Middle East is not a priority for Barack Obama. But the Americans are willing to deal over Syria because all they want is to basically to have Assad basically exit the scene, and they want to maintain the institutions. So far, the evidence shows that neither Tehran nor Moscow has either the will or the desire to really basically, negotiate the future of Assad. This is the stumbling block because the Russians and the Iranians believe that Assad is fundamental to their maintenance of interest, strategic interest inside Syria.
Well, I want to mention another factor as well, Emma Abshanas, and that is, of course, the ongoing nuclear negotiations between the P5+1 and Iran. Now, Iran, of course, looking for an agreement on that. Is this something that could once again be linked into the wider debate? We heard Fawaz there say that the fundamental differences are so great, but is there something that could bring Iran into at least closer discussion about a political solution within Syria?
Well, let me put it this way. The negotiations on the technicalities of the nuclear programs have reached a certain point that we can consider it to be a deal. But the main problem right now is the differences between Iran and the United States on different issues. One of them is Syria, one of them is the Iranians' role in the Middle East, and other things, debates and discussions that they have had for more than 35 years. And that's why the negotiations are taking much longer time. Maybe a couple of years ago, seeing an Iranian diplomat just talking to an American diplomat was impossible. But right now you can see that the Iranian foreign minister and the American foreign minister sitting with each other behind the closed doors and talking for hours and hours. And I don't think they will just talk on nuclear issues. They will talk on many different things. Of course, Syria, Iraq, and other issues will be discussed between them, and they should reach a political agreement between each other. As they said, they want to reach a political agreement. Well, the political agreement is that they should agree on mutual interests and the things that are in common to them, and then they will sign a deal on the nuclear issue. This is what's going to happen, and this is what they announced. They said that first we will have a political deal, then we will have the nuclear agreement. As to Syria, because the guests and you ask, Iran is insisting that President Bashar Assad should stay, the same to Russia, because they believe that President Bashar Assad being in Syria will help Syria to maintain its unity. If President Bashar Assad leaves for any reason, the unity of Syria will be destroyed, and we will face a Syria that's equal to something like Libya right now.
Well, let's go, Ryan Evans. Is there any sense whatsoever that there are those within the U.S. administration who may see opportunity in what appears to be an intractable situation? A group of people fighting against a common enemy in the coalition, then people outside the coalition, such as Iran. Is there any positives that can be gained out of that in terms of any longer-term developments within Syria itself?
My sense is there are definitely people within the administration, including people close to the president, that very much favor a more forward-leaning role as far as Syria is concerned. But at the same time, you also have many people in the administration, I think including the president himself, who's very skeptical about the positive impact that more U.S. involvement in the conflict can have. The best hope that, as far as Syria is concerned, is for the U.S. to incentivize somehow Assad to come to the negotiating table to negotiate about the political future of Syria. But I'm not that optimistic that this is going to happen anytime soon. As Secretary Kerry was just saying at this summit, this is something that's going to take years to resolve itself. And I really think that we're just seeing the beginning of a sort of transformation, a larger political transformation in the Middle East that could unfold over years, and we might not have even seen the worst of it yet.
Fawaz Gerges, a very critical point that does not appear to be discussed often enough is a separation in Syria of Bashar al-Assad and his government. In other words, the debate is about Bashar al-Assad. However, there are those who've been arguing that separate those out, you can remove Bashar al-Assad or could get agreement on his removal as long as his regime, as long as his government stays in place. Is that a possible scenario?
No, Mike, it does not seem to be possible in the short term or even the mid-term. Even the Americans don't buy this particular argument, as you well know. The reason why there are significant disagreements between the Americans and the Turks is that because they don't see eye to eye on the future of the Assad regime. Let me be direct. The American would like to maintain the regime, the system, the institutions. They want to shove Assad out, while the Turks and the Saudis and the various and the Qataris would like Assad and the regime itself to be toppled, because they don't basically see any distinctions between the Assad regime and the man himself. Final point on this particular question, Mike. We're talking about ISIS as somehow ISIS exists in a vacuum. Let's say ISIS or Daesh or ISIL is destroyed tomorrow. What will happen? What will fill the vacuum of ISIL? ISIS or Daesh is a manifestation of the breakdown of state institutions in the region, the fraying of the legitimacy of the state, of the spreading sectarian, ideological, and social fires in the regions. Without addressing this, the underlying causes of the rise of ISIS. I mean, ISIS would not have done as well as it has without basically positioning itself as the vanguard, the protector of the Sunni communities that feel basically persecuted and marginalized by the regimes of Syria and Iraq. So even though, let's say, ISIS is destroyed tomorrow, what will happen without focusing, without tackling the socioeconomic and political crisis in the Middle East? I fear that somebody else, some other entity would come to fill the space left by ISIS in the next 2 or 3 or 4 years when ISIS is defeated, if ever could be defeated militarily in Syria and Iraq.
Very quickly, Ryan Evans, what do you think would fill that vacuum if ISIS is defeated?
Well, I'm very skeptical as to if ISIS can be defeated, but I think Syria's best hope for stability is some sort of federalization, regional autonomy away from the center, the survival of the Assad regime or some sort of successor to the Assad regime, some sort of Alawite regime that still has a larger political authority over the country but has devolved a lot of political autonomy to Syria's various regions and provinces, but I don't think that's likely to happen anytime soon.
Well, on that note, my thanks to our guests, Imad Abshanas, Fawaz Gerges, and Ryan Evans. And why not add your voice to this discussion? You can post your comments at facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. or contact us on Twitter. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. I'm Mike Hanna. Thanks for watching, and goodbye for now.